وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناه فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثاره وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألك أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون وأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون أولم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم أولم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا مهدرون وآية لهم أرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عداك الأرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر والليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون. وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون. وما تأتيهم من آيات من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أن نتموا من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون. هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون. لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون. سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون. ألم أعهد عليكم يا بني آدم لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلا تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون. اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم تختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسخنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علينا الشعر وما ينبغي لها إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أن خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وزللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أن خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هم خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ناسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهم بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلقوا مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمر إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وجل فرجهم.
صلوات اللہ علیہ حسین. بسم اللہ. اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. میں حدیث قصہ کی تلاوت کر رہا ہوں، آپ لوگ غور سے سنیں. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. روی عن فاطمۃ الزہراء سلام اللہ علیہا انہا فقالت دخل علی ابی رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم فی بعض الایام وقال لی یا فاطمہ انی لا اجد فی بدنی ضعفا فقلت له اعیذک باللہ یا ابت من الضعف فقال یا فاطمہ ایتینی بالکساء الیمانی فغطینی بہ فأتیت بالکساء الیمانی فغطیت بہ وصرف انظر الیہ رزم وجہ یطلع لہ نورا کأنہ البدر فی لیلۃ تمامہ وکمالہ. قالت فاطمہ سلام اللہ علیہا فما كانت الا ساعة وإذا بولدی الحسن قد اقبل وقال السلام علیک یا اماہ فقلت علیک السلام یا قرۃ عینی وثمرۃ فؤادی. فقال یا اماہ انی اشم عندک رائحۃ طیبۃ کأنہا رائحۃ جدی رسول اللہ. فقلت نعم ان جدک نائم تحت الکساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الکساء وقال السلام علیک یا جداہ یا رسول اللہ اتأذن لی ان ادخل معک تحت هذا الکساء. فقال له نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل الحسن معه تحت الکساء. قالت فاطمہ سلام اللہ علیہا فما كانت الا ساعة وإذا بولدی الحسین فقد اقبل وقال السلام علیک یا اماہ. فقلت وعلیک السلام یا ولدی یا قرۃ عینی ثمرۃ فؤادی. فقال یا اماہ انی اشم عندک رائحۃ طیبۃ کأنہا رائحۃ جدی رسول اللہ. فقلت نعم ان جدک واخاک نائمان تحت الکساء. فدنا الحسین نحو الکساء وقال السلام علیک یا جداہ السلام علیک یا من اختارہ اللہ. اتأذن لی ان اکون معکما تحت هذا الکساء. فقال له نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل الحسين معهما تحت الكساء. قالت فاطمة سلام الله عليها فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بأبي الحسن علي عليه السلام فقد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام یا امیر المومنین. فقال یا فاطمہ انی اشم عندک رائحۃ طیبۃ کأنہا رائحۃ اخی وابن امی رسول اللہ. فقلت نعم ہا ہوا ما ولدیک نائم تحت هذا الکساء. فأقبل علی نحو الکساء. قال السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ اتأذن لی ان اکون معکم تحت الکساء. قال له نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل علی علیہ السلام معهم تحت الکساء. ثم اقبلت نحو الکساء وقلت السلام علیک یا ابتاه یا رسول اللہ اتأذن لی ان اکون معکم تحت الکساء. قال نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخلت معهم تحت الكساء. قالت فاطمة سلام الله عليها فلما اکتملتا جميعا تحت الکساء فقال الله عز وجل اعلموا یا ملائکتی و یا سکان سماواتی و عزتی و جلالی انی ما خلقت سمان مبنیتا ولا ارضا مدہیتا ولا قمرا منیرا ولا شمسا مضیئتا ولا فلکا یدور ولا بحرا یجری ولا فلکا یسری الا فی محبت هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء فقال عالمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن رسالته هم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبنوها فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وأقبل نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله إن الله يقرئك السلام يخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سمام مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا أجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فقال تأذن لي يا رسول الله فقال لا نعم قد أذنت لك فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد فقال علي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جعم من شيتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحقت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيتنا فعزوا وسعدوا ورب الكعبة فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثنا بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا في هذا في محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبينا فيهم المهموم إلا فرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا كشف الله همه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اللهم صل على
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، اب شاہزادی کہاں، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، نہ اپنا وہ گھر ہے نہ اپنا مدینہ، نہ اپنا وہ گھر ہے نہ اپنا مدینہ، وہ باہیں چچا کی تمہارا وہ سینہ، بولو خدا را تم ہو کہاں میں کہاں، قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، جس دن سے تم سے جدا ہو گئی ہو، جس دن سے تم سے جدا ہو گئی ہو، دیکھو تو بابا میں کیا ہو گئی ہوں، اجڑا مکان ہے رہتی ہوں اب میں جہاں، قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، کہتی نہ تھی دیکھو نہ جاؤ بابا، کہتی نہ تھی دیکھو نہ جاؤ بابا، ترس کھاؤ مجھ پر ترس کھاؤ بابا، تم کیا گئے ہو مجھ پر گرا آسمان، قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ملنے کو ہم سے چلے آؤ بابا، ملنے کو ہم سے چلے آؤ بابا، ایک بار چہرہ دیکھا جاؤ بابا، اے پیارے بابا پھر ہم کہاں تم کہاں، قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، چلو شام چلتے ہیں ہم سب ہی مل کر، چلو شام چلتے ہیں ہم سب ہی مل کر، وہاں دیکھنا کیا ہے چہلم کا منظر، بی بی سکینہ کرتی ہے اب تک فغاں، قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، ہائے قیدی ہوں میں بابا جان، اب شاہزادی کہاں، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجہ.
صلوات. ایک اور بڑا صلوات اللہ. تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، سکینہ اب وہ سکینہ نہیں رہی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا۔ کیا کہہ رہی بیوی اپنے بابا سے؟ وہ دور رے تھا تم ناز جب اٹھاتے تھے، وہ دور رے تھا تم ناز جب اٹھاتے تھے، خود اپنے ہاتھوں سے کھانا مجھے کھلاتے تھے، تماچے کھاتی ہے اب میری کم سنی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، یہ حال دیکھے کہ بیمار بھائی روتا ہے، مصیبتوں کا وہ مجھ پر پہاڑ ٹوٹا ہے، کمر ہے 4 برس میں جھکی ہوئی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، نہ جانے کب سے ستم گر تھے منتظر میرے، ہر ایک موڑ پہ پتھر تھے منتظر میرے، پھوپھی کے ساتھ سکینہ جدھر گئی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، نہ قید ہو کہ میں زندان شام میں آتی، تمہارے ساتھ رہی کربو بلا میں رہ جاتی، ہائے میرے گلے پہ چھری کیوں نہیں چلی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، جہاں سے گزری کھلے سر یہ کہہ رہے تھے سبھی، یہ کربلا کی گھڑی بل وطن کی ہے بیٹی، غریب ہو گئی بیٹی امیر کی بابا، تمہاری بیٹی کی دنیا اجڑ گئی بابا، وہ شہر کے سر سے یہ رو رو کے ہائے کہتی تھی، میں قید خانے سے آزاد ہو نہیں سکتی، تمام ہوں گی یہی میری زندگی بابا، سروات دونوں بازو وہ شہنشاہ ہے وفا کے تھامے، لاش عباس پہ شبیر بکا کرتے تھے، بھائی تم بعد ہمارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، اس طرح لگ تھی نہ اکبر کے کلیجے میں سنا، اس طرح ہوتی نہ سادات کے خیموں میں فغان، یوں نہ زینب کے سہارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، ہوتے عباس دلاور تو نہ خیمے جلتے، شام غربت نہ سکینہ کو تماچے لگتے، گھوشوارے نہ اتارے جاتے، کاش ابا سے نہ مارے جاتے۔ کبھی چہرہ کبھی بازو کبھی سینہ پیٹا، قید کانے سے وطن آئی تو زینب نے کہا، دن نہ یوں ہم میں گزارے جاتے، کاش ابا سے نہ مارے جاتے۔ آج بھی آتی ہے یہ قبر سکینہ سے صدا، اے چچا لاتی نہ زندان میں یوں ہم کو قضا، ساتھ اگر ہم بھی تمہارے جاتے، کاش ابا سے نہ مارے جاتے، کاش ابا سے نہ مارے جاتے، کاش ابا سے نہ مارے جاتے۔ صلوات۔
Come closer. Thank you. Before I begin, if we could please recite a Fatiha. First and foremost, in honor of Syed Zawwar, Hassan, Rizvi, as well as Seema Kazmi, Syed Rada Ja'far, Syed Zair Hassan Rizvi, Syed Badr Hassan Rizvi, Syed Hasib Asghar, Ja'far Mirza, and Syed Mu'jiz Hussein, Rahimallah man qara'a Surat al-Fatiha. Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد قال الإمام زين العابدين عليه السلام وأما حق أبيك فتعلم أنه أصلك وأنك فرعه وأنك لولاه لم تكن فمهما رأيت في نفسك مما يعجبك فاعلم أن أباك أصل النعمة عليك فيه واحمد الله واشكره على قدر ذلك ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. The first of our very, 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 very loud salawats in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. A second louder one in honor of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And a third with your loudest voices in honor of the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asr wa zaman. Allahumma salli. My respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. The passage in question is arguably the most descriptive and wonderful passage on the rights of the father by Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Indeed, a father can either make or break our life. Anyone who's been fortunate to have met their father in their lifetime will say that their father is arguably one of the greatest forms of rizq that they've ever had. Because however much money you have in this world, and normally the word rizq is associated with money, you can never buy having a father who's a pleasant father, a compassionate father, a soft-hearted father, a kind father. And likewise, you'd pay as much money as you can to see him for one more day in your life. Therefore, you found that every religion in the world today, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, even those without the religion will tell you about the importance of the father figure in their life. That you'll see, for example, countries which are not Muslim, but they'll have a day known as Father's Day. That day, known as Father's Day, may be celebrated by your Muslim and non-Muslim friends. As in, your non-Muslim friend does not need to read the Quran for him to recognize that the father is a blessing in one's life. Because loving one's father is part of your nature. It's not something that you necessarily have to teach anyone. But observing the rights of your father is something that religion provides you with an understanding on. What are the rights of my father? How do I observe them? For all I know, my father living in my life, there may be certain rights of his that I have not observed. I think I've observed the rights of my father. I think I've shown the best akhlaq to my father. I think, for example, I've honored my father. But what do the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam say about the father? What do they stress on the importance of observing the rights of the father? Because today, I find that when a person says they love their mom and they love their dad, they love their mom because she's ready to be a slave for them virtually. And they love their dad because their dad's a cash machine for them. In reality, in some cases, our love for our parents is on what our parents give us. In reality, is that enough? As in, does the religion of Islam say respect your mom because she's cooked for you? And respect your dad because he's paid for your tuition fees? Or is there a lot more to that that has to be observed within the school of Ahlul Bayt? Because only when a person understands the rights of their father will they in reality make it to eternal bliss. If a person neglects the right of their father or neglects the rights of their parents in general, then the fasts and the prayers and the ziyarats and the majalis that you do are all worthless at the end. If I don't recognize the right of my parents on me, what's the point of me going Karbala and Najaf when I've been rude to my father? What's the point of me going to Hajj when I've been someone who's been disobedient to my parents? I go to Allah's house when Allah has asked me to look after the rights of my parents. Therefore, in Risalat al-Huquq, Imam Zayn al-Abidin wanted to elucidate on the rights of the father. And that's why the reality is that each and every one of us, after a majlis like this, has to make sure that we find a way in which such a passage is in the non-Muslim media. When Father's Day comes about, there should be a way in which this passage is in your local paper or on the internet or, for example, at a TV outlet, so that the non-Muslim world understands what we believe is the position of the father. Someone might also ask a question. My dad died 15 years ago. Your dad died 26 years ago. Your dad died 3 years ago. Your dad died 5 years ago. Do they still have rights on us even though they're 6 feet under the ground? My father died. Syed Zawwar Hassan, for example, is now passed away. May Allah bless his soul. Does he still have a position where his children have to observe certain rights for him? Or does his rights on us end the moment he goes into the qabr? Let us this afternoon look at the rights of the father within this majlis, and I'd like to do this in the following stages. Number one, why did Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam compile Risalat al-Huquq? And how can such a passage be given to non-Muslims when they ask you about the meaning of Islam? Number two, when Imam says that your father is your root, isn't that pretty obvious? Number three, when the Imam says whenever you're proud of something in life, always remember your father is the root of that blessing. Why does he remind us of this? And which things affect the human being which make them forget their fathers as the fathers grow older? Number four, if my father is not religious, do I still respect him? What if I've become more religious than my dad? Should I talk down to my dad? Number five, what if my father is not a Muslim? Say I'm a convert and my dad's not a Muslim. Should I respect my dad? Or should I make it clear to him that because you're not a Muslim, you're going to hell and I'm the only one going to heaven? Number six, my father passes away. Does he have rights over me or doesn't he? And if he has rights, what are those rights? And what is the best thing? Which is the best a'mal to perform to make my father pleased in the world of barzakh? And how can we ensure that we perform that? And finally, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, how important was his father to him? Especially in the fact that Imam's mother died a couple of days after she gave birth to him. Let's examine this and dissect the topic in complete depth. This particular passage is in a book called Risalat al-Huquq. I personally believe that Risalat al-Huquq, if you put it alongside Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, are the best two books to give to your non-Muslim friends. Someone says, wait, Sayyidina, the Quran is the best book. There's no point recommending a book you haven't finished reading. There are many Muslims out there who'll say to you, Wallah, the Quran is the best book. You finished it cover to cover? Say to you, no, I haven't finished it cover to cover. So how can a book be the best book when you've not finished it cover to cover? It's like someone saying to me that this is the best car you can drive. I said, you ever driven one? I said, no, I haven't driven one, but I've looked at it. It looks cool, it looks nice, it looks respectable. There's no point then telling me that it's the best car to drive. That's why they have a test drive. Likewise with the Quran, the reality is that many Muslims only respect the Quran simply because their parents told them that make sure you respect it. Weddings, funerals, bring it out, and every once in a while pretend you're reading it. Reality is that I can't recommend the Quran to a non-Muslim. Why? Because I've never finished reading it. And on the second level, the reality is majority of the Quran is contextual. If you give it to a non-Muslim and he doesn't understand 7th century Arabia, he's going to get baffled by certain lines. You can't deny to me that you haven't been baffled by certain verses of the Quran where you're like, I promise if I wasn't a Muslim, I wouldn't believe in this. But because I'm a Muslim and my parents will kill me if I change my mind, I'm going to believe in this. So the reality is that the Quran is not the best book to give. So what's the best book? The best book to give in reality is Risalat al-Huquq. It's available online. If you, for example, have a non-Muslim friend at work, some of you may have a non-Muslim friend at work, or you may have a couple of non-Muslim friends at college or university, both male or female. You want to recommend to them about the religion of Islam, the best book is give them this one. Why? Because in this one, you have the rights of God, the rights of yourself, the rights of your stomach. For goodness sake, the Imam talks about the rights of the stomach. You imagine all the paya and nahari and everything that we put into our stomach. Imam Zayn al-Abidin would cringe if he saw some of the stuff we eat. But the rights of the stomach, the rights of your private parts, the rights of your eyes, the rights of your ears. My ears have rights. Everything God created has a right over me. I have a responsibility with everything God created. And one of the sections is the rights of the father. What does the Imam say? Know that the right of your father is that he is your root and you are his branch. And if it wasn't for him, you would never be. I turn around, I say, Imam, that's pretty obvious. My father's my root, I'm his branch. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be. I said, unless my name is Jesus or Adam, pretty much all of us believe that's pretty obvious. That your father is your root, we are a branch. If it wasn't for him, being with my mother, there's no way I would be. But Imams of Ahlul Bayt never say things which are too simplistic nor too obvious. What the Imam means here is what? The Imam means that recognizing you have the root that is your father in your life is a massive blessing. Because in society, you may live next door to someone who doesn't know who their father is. Isn't that true? Today, in Western society, you can meet someone, say, who's that? Says, my mom. Say, where's your dad? Says, I don't know. Say, you never met your dad? Says, no, bro, I don't know my dad. So why don't you know your dad? Your dad's your root. You are the branch. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be. Bro, I don't know. You know, my mom says that dad was around for a short while and she never met him again. What that normally means is either the guy was hurtful to the mom and he walked away, or that unfortunately from an act of adultery, you found that a child is born in this world who doesn't know who their father is. Imam says the rights of your fathers you recognize. He's your root, you're his branch. Without him, you would never be. Meaning that thank Allah every day that you had someone you could call Baba. Because there are many in the world who cannot say Baba. Isn't that true? There was in America this famous TV series called Jerry Springer. It was a bit tongue-in-cheek. Those adults who are here may remember it. They used to bring out a lady. Now we don't know if these are true or not, but they're certainly a reflection of society. You may not get the real people themselves. A lady would come out, she has a child with her. MashaAllah, young child, like the young children here who are making me walk on eggshells as I'm using the terminologies that I normally would use. You found that lady, she has the child next to her, and they want to find out who the father is. Baba, what do you mean want to find out who the father is? Simple, you come to our mosques, you say Asad, for example. Asad is the son of Syed Hassan, Syed Zawwar, Hassan. It's easy. So his name is Asad Rizvi. When they came to this show, you say, who's the father? I think it's this one. He comes out, the poor guy, does a DNA test, X. Next. Baba, 26 minutes later and still we're not sure who the fathers are. Why? Because in this world, one of the psychological worst feelings for you as a human being is seeing everyone else know their dad except you. You may not reveal it, by the way. We have friends of ours, blatantly, English friends of ours, really good lads, but that is always a sensitive point for them. They don't like to open it up too much, and we don't open it up too much. But that's why for us in Islam, number one, nikah is so important. Nikah is, how many words is nikah? 7, 8? Even the most basic nikah, you know, most Maulanas, what they'll do is they'll extend the words of the nikah more and more so the hadiyah might increase a little bit for them. Reality is that the nikah doesn't really need to be that long. A nikah is what? So you agree the dowry. You agree that, for example, with the family that we're going to have this much mahar. You might get 2 candidates to be witnesses, even though in Shia law you don't need 2 witnesses in a nikah. In Sunni law you need 2 witnesses in a nikah. But in Shia law, you don't need 2 witnesses in nikah. So someone says, well, who's those 2 guys who are saying? Make them feel good for the day. You put them at the front and you make them feel like they're close to you. Otherwise, those 2 are not needed. It's recommended, but not wajib. Maulana, all they need to say is what? The girl says, zawwajtuka nafsi. And you reply, qabiltu. And that's literally all that needs to be done. Someone says, so what? 3 words make my marriage become sanctified? It's not the marriage becomes sanctified. It builds up a reliability and a trust and an honor between the 2. That it's not just randomly, I met you at a club in town, and then before I know it, we have a kid with each other. Rather, there is actually a nikah process which is done where we observe one another's rights. Otherwise, in Islam, male and female is a natural relationship. Why do I need a nikah? Natural, male, female. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to show that a relationship between a male and female is not just physical. There's a spiritual element to that relationship. That's why you found in early Islamic history, truly you feel sorry for those companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who did not know who their fathers were. It was very difficult for them. It really was. Because you imagine, that you see everybody around you. What's his name? Ali, son of Abu Talib. That's it. It's clear. You know who his father is. You look at somewhere else. You see this person's name, for example. What's your name? Ammar, son of Yasir. What's your name? For example, Miqnad ibn al-Aswad. Each one of them knew their fathers. But then there were others, they were given a name with a father, but that wasn't really his dad. You see someone like Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As, he is associated to who? Al-As bin Wa'il. They said that Al-As bin Wa'il is his father. Al-As bin Wa'il used to be the one who the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, whenever he would walk past him, he would shout out, Abtar! 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 Abtar, what does it mean? It means the animal whose tail is cut. In Arabia, if an animal's tail was cut, they would call the animal Abtar. Al-As used to make fun of the Prophet because the Prophet's kids kept dying. He had a boy, died. Another kid died. And you know, for us, if you ever lose a child at a young age, and I say this especially to the sisters, don't be too despondent. Because even the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, his family, lost children at a young age. And some people think that Allah wouldn't test the Prophet. The Prophet lost 2 boys at a young age. This man, what would he keep saying? Abtar, Abtar, meaning that you got no lineage now. Your boys are all dead. You're not going to have anyone to continue your line. What happened was that the Quran replied by saying, no, we will make sure that his lineage continues. But not in the way you Arabs think. We're going to make sure that he has a daughter. And that daughter, her lineage will continue forever. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. We have given you abundance. Look at Bibi Fatima's children. Wherever you go, you see Sadat from Bibi Fatima. Isn't it true? You go to Iraq, you see. Iran, you see. Lebanon, you see. Pakistan, it's questionable, but I'll have to accept it for today's Majlis. No, only joking. Even the Pakistan, India, everywhere you go, you see Sadat. But the final verse said what? Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. The one who's your enemy is the one whose line's cut. If Al-As's line's cut and his boy's called Amr, that means As isn't Amr's dad. That meant that Amr ibn al-As always knew there was a problem with not knowing who his root was. So what would happen? One day, I remember Imam al-Hassan met Amr ibn al-As. Imam al-Hassan, Amr ibn al-As cursed Mawla in front of Imam al-Hassan. And Imam al-Hassan looked at me and said, I don't blame you for cursing my dad. I know why. Because people like you, who so many men jumped over the fence of their mother's houses, of course they'd hate people like my dad. My dad born in purity, whereas you were born in a place you wouldn't want to be. So therefore you found that this person didn't know who his root was. Look at Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, his father Ziyad. Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, commander against Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam from Kufa. His father Ziyad, what was his name? Go to any book of Islamic history. Ziyad, son of his father. Imagine that was your name at school. Imagine on the school register. Always, I remember in our school register, you had a few names, and then you had Patel, went on for like 7, 8, 9 names. But at least those guys, they knew their families. Imagine on the school register your name is, for example, Ammar, son of his dad. Someone would be like, bro, what's your surname? I'm not sure, I don't know who the pops was and everything. So just called me Ammar, son of the dad. Ziyad ibn Abihi, Ziyad, son of his father. Imagine. So you had in early Islamic history, there were companions. They didn't know who their root was. When Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, number one, know the right of your father, is that he is your root and you are his branch. And if it wasn't for him, you would never be. There's a psychological system here. Someone say, Sayyidina, is it true that the son of zina can never love Imam Ali alayhi salam? It's an interesting question. Sometimes you hear Maulana say that anyone who's the son of adultery can never love Imam Ali alayhi salam. No, that is not to be taken in the absolute sense. That was contextual. That, for example, after the Prophet died, there were certain personalities like Amr ibn al-As. They are the sons of zina, and they hated Imam Ali. They hated Imam Ali, partly they hated the world anyway, because if you don't know who your dad is, you pretty much hate the world. You want to see the dictators in 20th century Europe, go and see their relationship, whether they knew who their dads were or no. There's a checkered relationship between them and their fathers. So on the one hand, that's there. Even Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the 10 horse riders who trampled their horses on the body of Imam al-Hussein, when Mukhtar al-Thaqafi caught them, he said, what's your name? They gave the name. He said, what's your dad's name? He said, I don't know. So what, you don't know your dad? He said, I don't know my dad. Why this person will then ride a horse on the body of Imam al-Hussein? He hates the world. And he takes out the vengeance. Because imagine at school, your mom comes to collect you one day, your dad comes to collect you, and then there's someone there who's like, I'm never going to have my dad collect me. I don't know who my dad is. So you have that. Someone says, is it true the son of zina, who doesn't know who his dad is, can never become a marja'? That's true. In Shi'ism, the son of adultery can never become a marja', but he can become a mujtahid. Every marja' is a mujtahid, but not every mujtahid is a marja'. Every marja' is a mujtahid, but not every mujtahid is a mujtahid is someone who has reached the level where they do their own taqleed. They do not need to do the taqleed of anybody else. But a marja' is a mujtahid who publishes his findings to the world, rather than just keep his knowledge to himself. So you may have someone in Qum today who's a mujtahid, who may be at the same level of Ayatollah Sistani, but he's decided not to publish a risala. Whereas Ayatollah Sistani publishes a manual for people to follow. Can a person who's the son of adultery become a mujtahid? Yes, they can. Which means they can become higher than most of us will ever reach. True? Because someone might say, oh, what have they done wrong? They've done nothing wrong. Nothing at all. But I'll tell you one thing. If the media got hold that your Shia leader was the son of adultery, they won't leave the guy day and night. Simple as. You find out that someone has come from that background, you're not going to leave him day and night. You're going to destroy him. You say, but Baba, it's not his fault. Who said it's his fault? No one said it's his fault. But when you lead 300 million people, you can't have a black dot on your CV. You need to make sure you cover even things which you've not done. Sometimes people, even like Ayatollah Sistani, people say, why doesn't he, for example, come out in public? Listen, he comes out in public one day. He could come out. He'll come out, cross, maybe even go to the supermarket. If there's a lady pictured next to him, you know how people with WhatsApp, they'll take a picture and spread it everywhere. You might have seen a few examples in your life. So, it happens. So you found, therefore, that for us, can he become a mujtahid? Yes, he can. But can he become a marja' who leads the whole school? No. Not because he's going to go to hell or something. Not at all. Rather because the situation dictates when you're a leader. Socially, there are certain precautions that are to be taken. Therefore, the Imam continues. Know that the right of your father is that he is your root and you are his branch. And if it wasn't for him, you'd never be. Then he continues by saying, so whenever you see anything in yourself that you're proud of, then know that your father is the root of that blessing. Allah. Why? I could come to Asad now and say to him, Asad, how did you do so well, for example, in your business? He say, bro, you know, I'm skillful, I'm the best, no one's like me, I've done this, I've done that. Because there are people who do that, by the way. You can sit with someone who's a top consultant doctor at a hospital. MashaAllah, you're amazing. He goes, yeah, I know, you know, I'm pretty sharp at what I do, I'm pretty the best. But no mention of the father at all. The human being can reach a level where when you ask them about their own successes, they don't mention what Imam Zain al-Abidin says. Whenever you see in you something you're proud of, know that your father is the root of that blessing. Because you could end up reaching a level where you forget your dad. Many of us don't realize the nights that our dad spent in dua for us. While we may have been doing complete opposite to what our dads wanted, our dads would be in the prayer mat. Would we have seen them? No, because by the time we've got home, they're sleeping. Many of us don't realize if it wasn't for our dad's tasbih or our dad's ziyarah, we wouldn't be who we are. It was our dads. In many cases, we will never see the sweat that they went through for them to allow you to become who you are. What do you see of dad? Oh, dad's probably going to give me a lecture. Dad's nagging me. Yes, but that same dad is the one who, if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be who you are. And how many times do we realize only years later, when you start working and you start having children, you begin to realize, you know what, now I see where dad was coming from. Now I see what he meant. How many of us, wallah, if it wasn't for our dad saying, go and wear black, get ready, Majalis on Muharram, would we come to Majalis today? If it wasn't for your father guiding everybody to Majlis al-Hussein, doesn't matter if a Majlis is in a house somewhere, Or a majlis is in a big imam barga. If a majlis has a known speaker, not a known speaker, get ready. But dad, you know what? Please, I want to stay, I want to watch football. Get up, we're going majalis. Years later, how many of us reflected on that? Thought, you know what? That might have been the barakah that led me to be who I am. That my father instilled in me the love of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Can you ever thank your dad enough for that? When you see yourself blessed in life, never forget your dad's du'as, your dad's majalis, your dad's ziyarats, your dad's prayers. Someone says, yeah, but my mom as well. We've given 1,000 lectures on moms. Let's give the dad an opportunity as well. Every year, I hear the importance of the mom. I don't deny. All of us owe our mom. But many of us neglect that. Don't think sometimes your dad's not as emotional sometimes as your mom, or not as lovey-dovey. Doesn't mean that your dad's heart doesn't break when he sees you going off the path or even on it. Imam says, whenever you reach a level of success, never forget dad. That your father is the root of that blessing. And that's why the Imam continues. What does he say? He says, your fathers have 4 rights on you. The first of them, never call your father by his name. Alhamdulillah, I don't think in our communities we face such a problem. I certainly have never called my dad by his name. But you may find in some non-Muslim communities, blatantly, he'd be like, Steve, come in. You're like, who's Steve? He said, Dad. Did you just call your dad Steve? He's like, yeah, Steve, come here. I said, Baba, if I call my dad by his name, I get licked. This is what, imagine I call my dad and be like, my dad's name is Imad. Imagine I go to my dad, Imad. Be like, what? He'd look at me and be, what are you talking about? For us, alhamdulillah, there's an etiquette. I don't need to go to Geneva, nor do I need to go to Saint-Tropez for me to go to a finishing school. And there's a finishing school which is called Imam Zain al-Abidin. And he says to you that the first right of your father is that what you do is that you never call your father by his name. How many of you kids, I don't even know if it's appropriate for the kids, but they may remember, some of you who've now gone into your teenage years and 20s, remember The Simpsons. Simpsons, I think, is even too high for kids because to grasp some of those jokes, even 50-year-olds aren't sharp enough for the jokes. But you remember that there was a character by the name of Bart. He's a main character, yes. Bart Simpson, and he had his father. What was the father's name? Homer. Homer. Did you ever hear Bart, ever in your life, call him dad? Doesn't he always say Homer? He always says Homer. Everyone else says dad, but he says Homer. In American society, someone might say, Baba, this is just tongue-in-cheek. It's not, because kids pick up everything they listen to. They pick up everything they listen to on the TV. This boy was blatantly taking the mick out of his dad continuously by saying, for example, Homer, making fun of him, and so on. Imam says, no, the first right of your father is what you do. You call him, if my father, for example, my father's Syed. So I always call my father either Syed or dad. You know, us Iraqis, we can go a bit overboard with the formalities. If you ever meet an Iraqi and you see them say salam to each other, say salam for about 15 minutes is how are you, how are you, how are you. No one's answering each other, by the way. Say, how are you? Say, how are you? So, Baba, can you answer my question? I'm going to answer. I'm going to keep saying, how are you? But what you do is, my dad, Sayyid, Sayyidna. If my dad's a Hajji, he's gone to Hajj, I say Hajj. Or then after that, I might say Papa, for example, Baba, and so on. First right, you never call him by his name. Second, you never walk ahead of him into a gathering. Never walk ahead of him into a place. I've seen people, their dad's walking, but the dad's got old now. So he's not walking as fast as he could. Come on, dad, quick, quick. Baba, respect. Your dad's not as nimble as he used to be. Your dad takes his time, you take your time. Unless your dad says, son, you go ahead, or daughter, you go ahead. Have that level of respect, because when you were so slow in your movement, you look at the pictures with him, he would walk slow with you. And now that he's got older, and mashallah, you've become more nimble, now it's like, come on, dad, we're going to be late for the majlis. Forget the majlis. Forget the majlis. Going to be late. Your dad's more important than the majlis. What's the point of coming to majalis if you haven't understood the position of your dad? Your dad takes his time. Some people say, Dad, get ready, hurry up, we're going to be late, we're going to be late. And then you'll complain to your missus. Why is he always late? Never let that come into your psyche, because then your soul has become polluted. Rather, on the contrary, no problem, Dad, you take your time, or next time, just prepare a bit earlier, no problem. When you enter a place, you ask your dad, Dad, you go ahead of us, you're the father of the house. Some people today have lost that etiquette, wallah. I see people now who are Shia, and I look at them, I see their etiquettes, I'm like, you know what, so chavvy. You need some chivalry. That chivalry comes from this. That's number 2. Number 3, you don't sit until your dad sat. How many of us come home from the shopping, for example, supermarkets or whatever, the dad's holding shopping and the kids are sitting? The mom is holding shopping and the kids are sitting. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, never sit until your dad sat. I used to remember there was a Maulana father and a Maulana son. Both of them are Maulanas. Son would be sitting there in the crowd sometimes. If he's not reciting, the father may be reciting. Wallah, do you know what would happen? When the father would come up towards Mimbar, randomly in the middle of the crowd, the son stands up. So one day I asked the son, I said, why you stand up? He goes, that moment my dad stood up, I have to stand up. Until dad sat on Mimbar, then I sit down. Look at that level of etiquette. That etiquette that when my dad has entered a gathering, wallah, I've seen people, their dad has come back home, he's come in and said salam. They're like, hey dad, what's happening? Get up. Dad's come in. Dad might say, you know what? Bismillah. Sit down. You're excused. Whatever. Then you sit down. You don't stay sitting. Yeah, Dad, what's going on? Huh? You okay? There are people who have gone, this is the akhlaq of Ahl al-Bayt which we're missing. Imam Zayn al-Abidin saying this, not me. Imam Zayn al-Abidin is saying, your father stands, you stand. Your father sits, you sit. You can ask for permission from your dad. Dad, do you mind if I sit down? Of course, some dads after tonight's lecture may be a bit baffled when they see some of the behaviors. But that's what we want, because what is Mimbar al-Hussein? Mimbar al-Hussein is a reminder for me and for you. True? It's a reminder that maybe I've seen people, honestly, and so forget dads. I've gone into gatherings and places. You walk in, of course, not so much these days, let's say 10 years ago. You walk in and the people would be like all sitting, you know, from even your age group, be like, hey, salam, how are you? Hey, bro, stand up, man, stand up. When ilm walks into a room, you stand up. And if your father walks in, that's higher than ilm. So when your father walks into a room, you stand up. He might look at you and you say, why are you standing? You say, Dad, out of respect for you. There are some people who don't even kiss their dad's hands. Subhanallah. Wallah, there'll be a day you wish that hand was in your hand. There'll be a day you wish you could touch your father's hand one final time. Wallah. Not just to touch it, you wish you can kiss it and say to him, thank you for everything you've done for me, because there could be a second where it's too late and you can never thank him again. So the third right is when your dad sits down, you sit. Your dad stands, you stand. Fourth right, don't do anything that brings abuse to your dad's name. This is a big one. Why? Hey bro, you can't judge me. If I want to do haram, I'm going to do it. Habibi, it's not all about you. Your dad's name in the mosque is high. You're just ruining it. You've destroyed your dad's name by your behavior. Imam says, never do anything that brings abuse to your dad's name. You may believe that what you're doing, for example, suits you. Or what you're doing, for example, is cool. And then someone says to you, Baba, what you're doing is haram. Wallah, these things that you smoke, these substances that you take, these things that you drink, these places that you go, some of these is not suitable. Your dad's rep will be broken. I don't care. You only live once. I don't care. No one can judge me. Baba, it's not about you. The religion says don't bring anything that brings abuse to your dad's name. Your dad has worked his socks off to build the family's reputation in the community. Someone says, yeah, but I don't care what the community think. No, you have to care what the community think. Unfortunately, we don't live in solitary confinement. And therefore, there's a day you're going to get married. There's a day your kids will get married. There's a day you have to build relations. Your dad is saying to you that, Baba, please, don't do this thing. And I'm telling you out of respect for you. How many of us were fortunate to have dads who had soft hearts? Imagine you got a dad who did not have a soft heart. There are some who their dads literally took out abuse on them, which is not acceptable. But there are some we took our dad's kindness and we took advantage of it. When our dads would keep reminding us about certain things, you don't know, huh? Until later when we matured, we realized, you know what, dad was right. And therefore, Imam Zayd says, don't do anything that brings abuse to your dad's rep. I remember one of the Iraqi boys came to me. He had invited me for his wedding. I, unfortunately, don't go to many weddings. So I declined. I said, unfortunately, I cannot make it. He said, come on, bro, you're one of my best mates, this, that. I said, listen, bro, wallah, I don't attend. By the end of the wedding, I've said salam to more people than you, the groom, have, and I just need to relax. So then he said to me, is there any advice that you give me about this wedding and what I do? I said, don't start the first day of your marital life in haram. So he goes to me, what do you mean? I said, your dad's quite religious. Your mates aren't. So he said, so what do you mean? I said, well, your mates are going to ask for a DJ and there's going to be music and get some messed up looking guy playing the music. And you're going to want that to be there because people are going to say to you it's boring otherwise. So I said, inshallah, try and just start on a good note. Because your dad, you don't want to embarrass him that day. True? Because your dad's got Maulana friends, like me, for example. And your dad's got maybe some religious friends. So your dad doesn't want to be in a situation where his boy and the mates all of a sudden are like dancing it up or something. He wants you to have a certain etiquette. Because, we do nikahs in the mosques, we all act religious, and then the reception, we become whatever we become. So he looked at me, and he goes, it's going to be tough, bro. I said, well, Habibi, you asked me for advice. I can only advise you. So you want to do it, you do it. You don't want to do it, it's up to you. After the wedding, by about a week, I said to him, because I'm not coming to the wedding, inshallah, I'll come and see you. We go for dinner or something. I'll give you a gift. Because it's not wajib for me to go to a wedding. It's something, mustahab, for example. I don't have to be there if it's going to cause me any. So we met. He said, the best advice you gave me, bro. So I said, what do you mean? He goes, the boys, all of them at the reception were all like, just play it up, let's try, da, da, da. And I was like, nah, I look at my dad, I can see him in the distance. I'm like, what? My dad's been with me for 25 years. Some of these lads have been with me for 10, 12, 6, 4, not 25. So he goes, I could see him. And I thought, it's his day, not mine. So I'm going to look after his name. And he goes, best decision I ever made. He still sees me years later. And now, mashallah, he got married and he's got kids and so on. And he tells me, alhamdulillah, I started the first day in halal. Because he goes, I had barakah on my marital life. But also because of respect for my dad, I don't want to hurt him by doing something where he's like, okay, you and your boys enjoy, but I'm not that comfortable with these things. No, dad, you're going to be comfortable today. We want you to be comfortable. I don't care if everyone else is uncomfortable. So you see, Imam Zayd says the fourth right is that you don't do anything that brings abuse to your dad's reputation. Question, what if my dad's not religious? Do I still have to show akhlaq to him? Say my dad doesn't pray. We have dads in the Muslim community, even the Shia community. We have dads love Ahlul Bayt. They love Imam al-Hussein. Baba, he's so lazy, he can't get up to pray 5 times a day. Which to me, by the way, is the embodiment of absolute laziness and absolute ungratefulness. If you don't pray namaz, you're one of the most ungrateful, do I call you humans? One of the most ungrateful people in existence. Why? Because namaz is really a sign of gratefulness, isn't it? It's just like, thank you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to say thank you 5 times a day. I'm going to say it pretty quickly as well. I'm not really going to say it that slow because I want to finish it quick. But I'm going to say it. For you not to pray namaz, you have to be one ungrateful human being. Let's say my dad doesn't pray namaz. And I pray. My wife prays. I want the kids to have a good role model. How do I treat my dad? You treat him with the same akhlaq even if he did pray namaz. Same akhlaq. Akhlaq should never change. A reminder every once in a while, maybe sometimes your actions are better than your words. If you pray namaz, your dad looks at you and alhamdulillah, he'll be like, what, my son's praying, I should be a bit embarrassed that I'm not. But never be rude to your parents, because one of the biggest things shaitan can whisper to you is, what, you're more religious than your parents now, so you should always look down at them. It can happen, because sometimes you may have read more than your parents. Now you feel bigger than your parents. Now you talk down to your parents. No. If your parents aren't as religious as you, you still show the same akhlaq as you would if they were. Number two, what if my parents are people who, for example, encourage me to go to gatherings or to events where there is acts which go against Islamic law? You're saying my parents have rights on me. My dad's telling me, listen, we're going to a family wedding and that family side might not be that religious. They have alcohol on the table. Do I attend? Because, my dad, I got to respect my dad. No, at that moment you could tell dad, sorry dad, I'm not doing it. No, actually it's wajib to tell your dad you're not doing it. It's not even recommended. You have to tell your dad, if there's going to be alcohol served on our table, right blatantly in front of us, I don't care if they're our cousins or they're our in-laws. No. Because sometimes a person may fall in the trap that because it's my dad, you said you got to respect your dad. Respect doesn't mean that you respect him in areas where he disobeys Allah. You show honor to him on the areas of obedience. Otherwise, other than that, you say, akhlaq, dad, you know what, excuse me, maybe you want to go, but I cannot be there in this thing. Number three, what if my parents are not Muslim? This is a big one. Some of you here may be married to converts, am I right? Someone here might be married to a Hindu who's become Muslim. Sikh who became Muslim. Maybe, for example, they're married to someone who's Christian, she became Muslim. Let's say, those people, do they still respect their dads? Say you married a Hindu girl and her dad is still Hindu. Does she, when she becomes Muslim, still have to respect her dad? Or no, that's it, because now she's moved to the path of Islam, the path of heaven. And everyone else is on the path of? Does she still have to? Of course she has to. Doesn't matter if her parents are any religion, her parents are still her parents. The akhlaq has to remain the highest. Someone says, but you know what, if I go to their house, dietary requirements, whatever, it's pretty simple. On the one hand, if you can, you tell them about your dietary requirements of your new religion. And if you can't, then even in that period that, for example, a person may think about certain areas of Islamic law, this person has converted, there are exceptional circumstances for such people because there's a difficulty with their parents. Of course, exceptional doesn't mean that she goes to her parents' house and has like a bacon butty or something. No. But rather, exceptional in the sense that, okay, no problem. Normally someone might say that there are certain groups where najasa may apply and so on. No, but if she's a convert and she goes to her parents, that won't apply to her unless she wants it to apply to her. That's, of course, her taqwa. But she doesn't want it, hers is a secondary issue. Because there are some maraji' who've been approached by this, that my wife is a convert, her dad is still on his old religion, Islam says respect the dad has rights on you, so does she still have to respect them in all areas? Every area she has to respect them. The only time is if there's certain things of clashes with religion, she can make her point clear. Someone asked the question that my dad died many years ago, Sayyidina. So how do I still observe his rights today? Syed Zawwar, may Allah bless his soul. He's passed away now. Hassan might think that, you know what, I observed as much of these rights as I could when dad was alive, but how do I observe any rights now? Does my dad have rights over me now? Yes. Even after our dads are in their qabr, they still have rights over us. Which rights? On the one hand, there might be certain wajibat, obligatory acts that your father may, for example, still have missed. Some people's fathers have missed namazes. Sometimes you meet someone who's like, listen, Sayyidina, I missed like 7 years of namaz. If you've died and you've missed 7 years of namaz, then, for example, your son may take it upon himself to hire a maulana, let's say, somewhere in the world. You pay him a certain amount. It's called salat al-istijara. You pay him a certain amount. You say that my dad missed 7 years of namazes. Can you please pray them? And the person might reply back to you and say, okay, give me a couple of $1,000, because this can be an earning, and that person can pray them, because your dad's namaz, which are wajib, have to be prayed. Have to be. Otherwise, where he heads to, he'll always be in difficulty. Someone says, okay, bro, what if I'm alive and I've missed namazes? Can I pay someone? No, unfortunately, no. I wish someone called me a few months ago. They're like, we found this a'mal where if you pray, it like makes up for 80 years of missed namazes. I'm like, nah, bro, that's a fakey. Don't go there. It's not taking you anywhere. If you've missed namazes and you're alive, you got to make them up. You got to start making them up. Someone's like, but bro, I wasn't religious between the age of 16 and 19. I missed every namaz. You got a couple of years of namazes to make up then. And you best start ASAP. But if you, in your will, even if you're 16, you can write a will in Islam. Or if you're 70, because none of us know when Malik al-Maut comes to knock at the door. So in your will, make sure you always write that, listen, I've got this many namazes. Just in case I pass away, make sure someone prays it. So does my dad have a right over me when he's in the qabr? Yes. Number one, the things he's missed, which are wajibat. Number two, loans which are outstanding. If your father owes people money, you go to the estate of inheritance that he's left behind. If there's in the estate, as soon as he dies, from the estate of the inheritance, you have to pull out a couple of things before you give to the dependents what is their right. First thing you have to pull out is the money that he owes for hitting you. Your dad, if he's hit you and you've left blue marks or red marks, even if it's once, and he never asked you for forgiveness, there is a payment of blood money on that injury. And he has to make sure that in his will he has written. Either he can ask you for forgiveness. Sometimes our dads, a moment of anger, and later they might say sorry. Some dads don't say sorry. That dad who hasn't said sorry is in trouble when it comes to the will, because he has to make sure that he has said sorry and asked for forgiveness. Otherwise, depending on the color of the injury, he would have to have blood money taken out of the will. That can be, of course, demanded by the son. Some sons or daughters will turn around and say, listen, let dad's thing go. You know what, I was probably naughty, and I gave him a mad headache, and that's why he did it. Others, no. Why I say others, no? Because others are unfairly hit by their dad. In the Muslim and non-Muslim world today, there are drunk fathers. There are fathers who are abusive for no reason. They fight your mum and they end up taking it out on the kids. They have a bad day at work, they take it out on the kids. Islam's like, what? You think you can get away with it? The blood money to pay. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it black? On each one, there is a blood money to be paid for each one of these. You have to take that out of the will. If you missed Hajj, for example, you take the expenses of Hajj out of the will. And then after that, you look at what's left behind. Someone says, Sayyidina, my dad owed people £100,000. The estate that he left behind only has £33,000. So what does that mean? Does that mean that I have to pay the remaining 67,000? No. You pay zero. Your dad, the money he owes people can only be taken from the money he left behind. You, as the eldest son, for example, have no responsibility to pay your dad's debts as a wajib act. Mustahab, yeah, maybe you want to look after your dad in akhirah. You're like, you know what? I'll just chip in and get dad's things done. True? Wajib, because sometimes I see at funerals, the eldest son stands up and he says, listen, if my dad owed anyone money, please come up to me. They come up to you. Depends on what estate your dad's left. If your dad left 100 grand and people are owed 18 grand, then you have to make sure that you take the 18 and you give it. If your dad left 100 grand and people are owed 250 grand, you can only use what your dad's left. Someone says, but you're the eldest son, you got to give me money. That's absolute nonsense. Eldest son has no responsibility to pull out of his own pocket. If the dad has ended up owing people $40 million, and you are the eldest son, you're like, what have I been lumbered with? My dad was a businessman and I ended up, for example, as a car salesman, and I'm now being lumbered with his business. No, Islam would not say that. So, second right, outstanding debts. Sometimes you see your dad in your dream not looking good. Why is dad sad? Dad's crying, dad's complaining. It's always because one of these two. Either wajibat, which he owes Allah, or wajibat, which he owes the people of Allah, the creation of Allah. Number three, what else can I do for my father to help him? The best thing you can do for your father to help him in barzakh is to pay sadaqah in his name. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon his family, says, there is no act that makes your marhumeen smile in the world of barzakh after they die like the act of giving sadaqah. Give sadaqah. Your dad died 10 years ago, give sadaqah. Your dad died 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, give sadaqah in his name. Because in barzakh, they're awake, they move, they meet, they talk. That brings a smile on their face. And you know our fathers, they come back to see us at home, by the way. Our fathers, when they die, they still come back to see us at home. If they were the best of mu'mineen, the more iman and taqwa they had, the more days they would be allowed to visit your house. If they were a pure mu'min, they only see the good that you're doing at home. If they weren't the best of mu'mins, they also see the bad that you're doing in your house. And you therefore found that what can I do for them as well? I can visit their qabr, great act. You know, non-Shia, some of them will not read Quran by the qabr because they say it's bid'ah to give Quran as hadiyah for the dead. I don't know what's left of the religion. If that's bid'ah, then what's left? This religion becomes stale. For us, go to the qabristan, sit next to our dad's grave, recite the Quran. Recite as well, not just the Quran. Recite the ziyarah in honor of your dad, ziyarat Ashura, for example. That is something where the reward goes a long way. Further than that, try and make sure that you even do a hajj or a umrah on behalf of your father. That helps your father as well. Further than that, go on ziyarat on behalf of your father. Maybe your dad couldn't go to ziyarah of Sham, but he done Mashhad. Maybe he never done Mashhad, but he done Karbala. Maybe he did Karbala, but never got to do Samarra. Go to one of those places and say, Niyaba for my dad, who never managed to come here, I'm going to do the ziyarah for him. But above all else, one of the greatest gifts you can ever give your father is to organize a majlis and the hadiyah goes to your father. It's sad that sometimes people, when their dads die, the first year after they die, they do a majlis. Second year majlis, third year, now it stops. They forget about their dad. Dad's been buried under the ground. They begin to forget about him. And therefore what you find is that you should never forget. Rather, you try your hardest to make sure that every year, who was your dad's favorite member of Ahlul Bayt? You ask some people, they say to you, my dad's favorite was Bibi Fatima. Others say to you, my dad loved Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Others say, no, my mom loved Imam al-Hassan. Others say, no, my dad loved Imam al-Hussein. Whoever your parents loved, do a majlis on that particular date in honor, and you say the hadiyah goes to the parent, goes towards your father. And that's why if you ever see anyone who loved his father but was broken by his father's death, none like Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. Because Imam Zayn al-Abidin, when his mother gave birth to him, she died a couple of days later. Therefore, his father was everything to him. Imam al-Hussein was literally everything to Imam Zayn al-Abidin. Imam Zayn al-Abidin never met his mom because his mom died shortly after giving birth, so he was always with his dad. Wherever his dad would be, he'd be with him. Imagine you're with your dad, and every occasion that your dad needs you, except the day he needs you the most. That day when you see your dad in his final moments, isn't it something that breaks you, that you just wish you could tell your dad, Dad, I'll do anything for you to stay alive. I'll give everything for you to stay alive. Just one more day, Dad. Please, please, Dad. I want to see you with me. I want to be there to protect you. You imagine Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. For how many years did Imam Zayn al-Abidin have to live with the memory of Karbala, and the memory of Ashura, and the memory of the 10th of Muharram, and have to live with the memory that I would never want anybody, even my worst enemy, to live with. And what is that? The memory of seeing your father alone on a battlefield with no one to protect him. Imagine seeing your father with 5 people coming to attack him. Wallah, he'll break you. 10 people, he'll break you. Imagine seeing thousands surround your father. And imagine seeing of those thousands, one of them's arrow hit the head of your father. Allahu Akbar. How difficult must it be to see your father with an arrow pierced right through his forehead. Imagine another one when you see Harmala's arrow hit the chest of your father. Imagine seeing your father helpless on the ground. He looked like he had arrows all over his body. Imagine seeing your father thirsty, when you can hear the cry, al-atash, al-atash, al-atash. Imagine your father in those final moments. You want to quench his thirst, but you're not able to get to the water to quench his thirst. Imagine your father, at least with the likes of Syed Zawwar, you were able to at least bury his body, give him a janazah. Imagine the son of Fatima al-Zahra lay on the ground for 3 nights with no one to bury his holy body. And those thoughts remained with Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. How many years did the Imam live after Karbala? He lived for 34 years after Karbala. Imagine for the Imam, every time he saw something that reminded him of Karbala, he'd break down the moment he'd hear it or he'd see it. One day when he saw the butcher about to slaughter a sheep, he said to the butcher, "Have you given water to the sheep before you slaughter it?" The butcher looked at the Imam. He said to him, "Of course, O son of Rasulullah, I've given water to the sheep before I slaughter it." He said to him, "Oh man, my father lay on the plains of Karbala thirsty with no one quenching his thirst." On another occasion, the Imam saw a man in the Qabristan. He saw him and he said to him, "Oh man, when I die, will you bury my body?" He said to him, "Of course, O son of Rasulullah, I'll never leave your body except that I'll bury it." He looked at him and he said, "Oh man, my father lay on the ground for 3 nights with no one to bury his holy body." And that's why Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam narrates that my father Zain al-Abidin, when the poison of Bani Umayyah surrounded his body years after Karbala, he said the poison had surrounded the body of Imam Zain al-Abidin. He said, "I came to my father, I hugged my father." Because any of you, do you remember the moment your dad died? Didn't you just cry and break down at that moment? Didn't you just want to hug him one final time? The Imam says, "I came, I hugged my father when I saw him in pain. When I hugged him, I saw my father cry in a way like I've never seen him cry before." Allahu Akbar. 30 years after Karbala, but he cries in a way like he's never cried before. Imam al-Baqir said, "I looked at him. I said to him, 'Father, why do you cry? In a moment you'll see Rasulullah. In a moment you'll see Fatima al-Zahra. In a moment you'll see Ali ibn Abi Talib. In a moment you'll see Imam al-Hassan. In a moment you'll see Imam al-Hussein. Father, why do you cry when I hug you on your chest?' Listen to the reply. He said to me, 'Muhammad, Muhammad, Muhammad, my son, I cry because when I'm dying, you're on my chest. Whereas do you know who sat on the chest of my father, Abu Abdullah? I had to see shimmer on the chest of my father, and I was not able to go towards him and support him.'" Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون واللعنة الدائمة على القوم الظالمين. Raise your hands, all of us, my dear brothers and sisters. Tonight is a night of dua. These are the final nights of the Masa'ib of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Tomorrow is of course Bibi Ma'sooma Qum. And inshallah on Friday is Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. In the name of the son of Imam al-Askari, Imam al-Hujjah, Ya Allah, raise Sayyid Zawwar with the intercession of Muhammad and Al Muhammad, his family and the originators of this Majlis, Ya Allah. Bless them with the intercession of Muhammad and Al Muhammad. The attendees of this Majlis, Ya Allah, bless them with Ziyarat al-Hussein alayhi salam. Bless them with Shafa'at al-Hussein alayhi salam. Each and every one of us has a different trial, a different test in our lives. Let's read the ayah of the Quran in dua. the ayah that helps alleviate all of our different trials and tests. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All of us together. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ. Louder. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in honor of the man known as Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. Ya Allah, cure all of our loved ones. Help all of our youth stay on the path of Muhammad and Al Muhammad. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the Surah Al-Fatiha. But before it, wherever you may be, the loudest of your salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya
زيارة إن شاء الله. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى محرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. دعاء الفرج. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.